Okay, so we'll start. I thank you very much for your patience. We had some technical issues to come by, and we are still waiting for one of our panelists, and we're hoping that she will join us soon. But we decided to start the event, and I want to welcome you and say hello to everyone. I'm very glad that you all found your way into our online panel today and that you're attending our event Family Talks today. And firstly, just a quick note, please note that the discussion will be recorded or is recorded, and we would like to put it on YouTube later on. So if you do not want to appear on the screen, please make sure to switch off your camera and eventually change your full name into initials. But if you'd like to be shown, then you just stay logged on. So welcome everyone. My name is Annemone Christians-Bernsee. I'm the Deputy Director of the NS-Dokumentationszentrum in the city of Cologne, and I'm really happy to welcome you to the second edition of our event series, Family Talks. And in this series, we aim to engage in a conversation with descendants of Jewish residents of Cologne, former Jewish residents of Cologne, and discuss their family histories. And we're happy to welcome them to share their memories. And we're excited that today 4 descendants of 3 former Cologne residents will share their stories with us, and our panelists, who will I introduce shortly, and who are logged on today from very different parts of the United States and very different time zones. They are descendants of Jewish Cologne residents who were influential in the Cologne Carnival. And therefore, today's Family Talk is also a supporting event to our current exhibition, Shalom and Alaf, Jews in the Cologne Carnival, which is on display at the NS-Doc in Cologne until March 31st this year. In this exhibition, let me just quickly put a focus on this. We're focusing on Jewish participation in the Cologne Carnival since the beginning of the organized Cologne Carnival, which was at the beginning of the 19th century. Jews have been a big part of it, but at the same time, they were excluded from taking part. And with the rise of the Nazi regime, they were more and more radically excluded and persecuted, of course, and only few were able to flee. Carnivalists such as Hans Tobar and Max Salomon and Siegfried Sommer took the carnival with them into their exile, and within this exile, within the diaspora, it was a piece of home to them. So I'm very excited that today we can talk to descendants of Hans Tobar, Max Salomon, and Siegfried Sommer, and they can give us insights into their family history and their handling with it. And before we dive into the conversation, I may also mention some of the few organizational matters. I will briefly introduce our participants, our panelists, and then we will enter into a discussion round and then to a conversation which will be about an hour. And then we will open up the panel for questions from the audience. But please feel free to put your questions into the chat at any time, and we will come back to the questions later then, or you can just ask them when we open the panel. So I would like to start my introduction, and I warmly welcome Lisa Cordaro, and I hope her cousin Vicki Tobar is joining us later if Zoom will let her in. But
sorry to interrupt. She just came in, so she's in now.
Yeah, great. Vicki, yeah, we don't see her yet, but she's in the meeting. So I warmly welcome Vicki Tobar, and I warmly welcome Lisa Cordaro. They are both granddaughters of the carnival artist Hans Tobar. I also warmly welcome Laura Chanin, the great-granddaughter of Max Salomon, who founded the first and at that time the only Jewish carnival club, the Kleiner Club in Cologne in 1922. And finally, I extend a very warm welcome to Susan Heymann, who is the granddad. Maybe just note, I could just hear, so maybe if you don't speak, it would be really helpful if you put put the microphone off. That would maybe make the discussion a bit easier. But yeah, finally, a warm welcome to Susan Heymann, the granddaughter of Sommer, also known as Fritz Sommer, which was really challenging for us at some point. That Siegfried is also known as Fritz Sommer, who is one of the co-founders as well of the Kleiner Kölner Club, the first, and at that time the only Jewish carnival club. So first of all, if Vicki and Lisa may, I would like to just hand over and ask the first question to Vicki and Lisa, and maybe you could give us a short introduction into your grandfather's development or grandfather's biography at the time when he was living in Cologne, and maybe you could dive in by giving us some insights into his way into exile and to his first years in the United States.
Vicki, do you want to start?
I was just going to say the same to you. Hi, everybody. I'm sorry I had an issue getting in through Zoom, but well, why don't you start with the early years, and then I'll pick it up when he comes to the United States, Lisa.
Okay. Well, I don't know much about their experiences in Germany, except that my mother was 13 years old and her brother 16 years old when they first came to the United States. Hans was he was a professional, I guess, vaudevillian is what we would say here. That's how I was raised thinking of him. And Carnival was a major part of that. And
how are you doing today? What's going on? Sorry. Oh, it's okay. And I saw what Rachel sent me. Yeah, it's common excuse. That's a minimum. They had to fix it.
So his wife actually owned a store on the island of Norderney, and so she had her own career there. And when the troubles first started with the Nazis, she was very interested in leaving Germany, and he was quite confident that he had enough connections, even with the mayor's office, that he would be protected. So he was not inclined to leave. And then after Kristallnacht, my grandmother's store was destroyed. And she said, you can stay if you want to, but I'm leaving with the children. And so they made arrangements, and they had relatives here in the United States, and they made arrangements to leave. And that's pretty much what I know about the past, except that my mother always talked about Cologne as if it was her true home, and how beautiful it was, and described the place. When I was growing up, I thought it never rained in Cologne, because my mother always depicted it as eternal sunshine, and clouded over by this dark cloud that came along when the Nazis came. And then she didn't talk very much more about that, except a little bit of the hardships, but mostly it was about her memories of her childhood in Cologne and on Norderney, and how important the carnival was to everyone in the family. So.
And I have some things from our grandfather that kind of represent what life was like for him when he came to America. And one of the things, as Lisa said, our grandfather was a carnivalist, a renowned carnivalist. And one of the books that I have of his, in this book, and I have some pieces that I'll kind of read to you and show you, But what was poignant about this, and this book has his poetry, and it has all the newspaper clippings and all the advertisements from shows that they were putting on. But what I thought was especially kind of poignant is that he has initially a picture of what would be a carnival photo, and it's Viens 1933, which is, as I understand it, and forgive me, I mean, my translations are from Google Translate, so it's basically kind of a this was then, and then on the next page, he starts with the USA, January 1940. And so the rest of what is in here is some of what took place, some of the shows that he continued to do. And one of the shows, so they came in December 39. They came at the very end at December 39. And in here are advertisements for a show at the Brooklyn Fellowship Club on March 16th, 1940, 3 months after they got here. And this was starring Hans Tobar, Theo Tobar, and Lilo Tobar. So Theo Tobar is my father, Lilo Tobar is Lisa's mother. And 3 humorists from Cologne. And there was on March 9th, they had 2 shows that month, was a large, colorful review, and that was starring the master humorist from Cologne Radio, Hans Tobar, as well as some other people. And so it continued in later on in 1951, he was doing a big New Year's Eve party. I was at that point 2 months old, and he had associations with a number of places in the city that would do be like Rhineland clubs and cabaret clubs. And there was a big Cologne Carnival at the Rhineland Cabaret and Restaurant, and he was the president of a club that existed there, and he is billed as Hans Tobar president with the participation of Hans Tobar, the big Cologne Carnival canon. So this continued. In another paper, the German American, there was a program, and these programs generally started with the Star Spangled Banner. And this was again a program that also starred Theo and Lilo Tobar, and Hans Tobar in his own inimicable presentation of the world famous carnival for that program. There was, he was present at, he was present again at the Rhineland, and this article basically explains that Hans Tobar brought joy to the Rhinelanders in the USA. When Cologne celebrated Willie Osterman's birthday, a New York station broadcast a memorial service of our poet in German and in Kölsch. There was a prince and a maiden, the Rote Funken Orchestra, and a pair of Cologne duetists, and a big parade over the entire restaurant on Rose Monday. So Carnival absolutely continued. He participated, I mean, there's books of this stuff, but he participated in a Purim festival again in March of 1941. And he was billed then as the leader of the show and billed as the well-known carnivalist Hans Tobar. There's a Kölner Jüdische Club in New York at that time, and they had a Thanksgiving party and dance. And again, he's billed as the management of the evening is in the hands of the well-known artist Hans Tobar. And that was this was for Thanksgiving, so it was in November of 1940. There's again a Rhinelander Abend, a Rhinelander evening with dancing and humor, and Hans Tobar at the Prospect Unity Club. The Prospect Unity Club is a club that I grew up hearing about. And as I understand it and remember the discussion, it was a club for the refugees that came. And our grandfather was often the entertainment or the MC there. The Rhineland, I'm sorry, I just dropped my computer, so I need a second. The Rhineland Cabaret and Restaurant, again, had a program for Rhinelanders, and he was not part of the program, except on the back of the program were verse and lyrics written by him. Music was by Franz Ludash, and basically the things that he wrote, the shorter verse was Homeland, my Cologne on Rhine is the name of it. And it's Homeland, my Cologne on Rhine, my entire being belongs to you. Homeland, my Cologne on Rhine, greet me and say I'm coming home soon. So the love that he had for Cologne, another verse is Cologne on the green Rhine. This is my Cologne on the green Rhine. It can only be you alone, city full of humor and full of spirit. My song, 1,000 years old, but youthful, sounds forever. That's how people know you. That's how they love you. Cologne on Rhine, Cologne on Rhine. So there's obviously, as Aaron Knapstein knows, there's a suitcase of this stuff. But clearly, when they came to America with the refugees that escaped the Nazis, this influence of Carnival and of this love of the Rhineland and this love of Cologne just continued to live on in him. And there's more, there's pictures here that would be a typical photo at Carnival, but that all lived. And within our family, I remember carnival parties as a kid and getting dressed up and in costume in order to go to cousins who were having carnival. It just the time of year that it was and the significance of it and the impact of it just clearly continued to live on.
Thank you, Vicki. Yeah, that's, I think the story you shared, or the story of Hans Tobar there coming to the US and bringing the carnival with him is quite similar to your grandfather's story, Laura, to Max Salomon, who also took the carnival that he lived in so like with so much joy in Cologne, and he took it into his family's exile. And as I know, as you shared the documents of your family with us too, there are very impressive sources and documents that are showing this living, this afterlife of the carnival in the US. Would you agree?
Yes. So my great grandfather was Max Salomon. Him and my great grandmother and my grandmother all came to the United States in 1939. And yes, he continued his carnival life here. He passed away when I was 10 years old. And my great grandmother passed away when I was 13 years old. So being that young, I didn't ask a lot of questions. I mean, I was a child, so children don't ask questions about their background, their heritage. But luckily, I do have a beautiful scrapbook full of pictures and documents. And I have more documents here that tell the story of their life in Germany and also in United States and in California. They didn't talk about Germany much. It was a very, I don't know if it was a taboo subject, or if they did talk about it, they talked about it in either German or Yiddish. So I don't know a lot of the history, but once again, I have something to fall back on. I have this beautiful scrapbook that's on display at the exhibit. But I do have scans of it, and I have sent some scans of it for this talk so we can show some of them.
Yeah, well,
I was always wondering, why is he dressed as a female? Why is my great grandfather Max always dressed as this character? And Aaron explained, and Nina explained, and other people that have interviewed me, that was part of his carnival persona. And he carried that here. There's a whole bunch of pictures of him dressed, as I say, dressed in drag. And now I know why. But if you wanted to show some of those images I sent you, and I can explain some of them, some of who they are and what they are.
So sorry, Maria, I will show them. I just need quickly to make this technically possible, but I will please just go on.
Okay.
I will show the picture there.
So so he was very heavily involved in carnival in California. Lots of parties, lots of celebrations, lots of carnival. He performed in his character. And yes, in my scrapbook, I do have lots of family, lots of photos. So that is in 1927. So that was in Germany. And then, so in the scrapbook, there's lots of pictures of Hans Tobar in here. And there's pictures of Susan's family also in this scrapbook. So it's nice to have this connection with Lisa and Susan and Vicki. So there's a connection, nice connection there. So if you want to show the next one. Can I switch it, or do you have to switch it? Let's see. Oh, there you go. So here's one of his. So this is my great grandfather Max at the very top, sitting in the chair as the president and founder of the original Cologne Carnival Club, the Jewish Carnival Club. And then you see on the left side him in his costume. Most of this, it's all in German, so I can use my Google Translate, but that is him as participating in carnival festivities. I don't know who's at the bottom photo, if there's anyone. I don't know if Vicki, Lisa, or Susan recognize anyone in these photos.
No, it's funny because I have so many photos too with all of these people that I don't know. I would love to, pick
Be able to identify everyone.
Yeah, to see who they are, and some people show up in many different photographs, again and again and again. So obviously they were people he was close to.
And I know my great-grandfather did go back to Germany, and it was never, no one ever knew. My mom, when we went to Cologne a couple years ago with Lisa and Vicki, we learned that my great-grandfather Max went back to Cologne, but we never knew about it. He didn't
What
talk
year was
about
that?
it.
What year was that?
I might be able to find that out. I don't know if I can find it out right now, but I think there's an image about him going back and getting like one of the necklaces that we received, or I think my mom and I received. He also got one when he went back, and the person that he stayed with when my mom and I were there a couple years ago, he's the one who gave us the crescent necklace, because of what my great-grandfather did and then came back. But we never knew about it. It was kept very hush hush. He never spoke about it. Both my mom and I were very surprised and shocked that he actually did go back, because my grandmother swore she would never go back to Germany. She didn't want to step foot in Germany. She didn't want to have anything to do with Germany. And I was like that for a long time until Aaron reached out to me and I learned the history of my family and the stepping stones. And then I'm like, I've got to go see this place. It sounds like a wonderful place, even though a horrible thing happened. So if we can maybe switch to another photo.
Yeah, but just switching, I hope you can see this now. This is an image of Max with Erica, John, and Crystal. I hope you can see this.
Crystal was my great-grandmother.
Mm-hmm.
That was his wife.
And do you still remember or do you know when this picture was taken? When and where?
No, I don't know when this was taken. Unless there's a year written in the articles or handwritten, then I would not have a year unless it's written there.
Okay.
So that's my great-grandparents. They're in Palm Springs. That my great-grandparents, and then my grandmother and my dad. They liked to travel. They loved Long Beach, to Palm Springs, to the mountains, down to Mexico. They definitely like to travel. No camping, but proper lodging, but they definitely liked to get out and travel when they came to the United States.
So, Laura, when as you mentioned, this scrapbook is one of the main sources you have concerning your great-grandfather's carnival life in Cologne, but also after that. So, did you remember talking to him about this as well, or?
Unfortunately, because he passed away when I was 10.
Yeah,
and they never talked about Germany. They never talked about the war. They never talked about their life living in Germany, at least when I was around, or I didn't pay attention to it. But I was little. I mean, I was single digits old. And for someone that young, you're not necessarily gonna pay attention to talks like that or ask questions. And looking back on it, I wish I could ask a whole bunch of questions, I wish I could take that all back and ask. So all I really have is this scrapbook full of pictures and handwritten notes. I have some documents that they're all in German, so I can have someone translate them, and news articles that aren't necessarily in the scrapbook that I have loose. But this is all I have. Not much was passed down through the family because they didn't bring much here to the United States. So I'm just lucky to have this scrapbook and honored to have it there on exhibit for this, on display at the exhibit. But yeah, so this is, I don't have much, so I cherish what I do have.
Can I ask why Max settled in California? Did he know people there? How did he wind up in California?
That's a great question. I believe they came through Ellis Island, and how they ended up in California, that's a good question. I might be able to read or have someone translate the documents I have to find out why they went from New York to California. And I believe he was a salesman here. I think he sold paper here, if I remember correctly. And he was honored with lots of awards about being like top salesperson. And but coming why, I am not sure. If someone asked where in California were they lived in Los Angeles.
So in New York, there was a very big German Jewish community in the Washington Heights area of New York, and that's where my mother lived with her family when she came here. But was there a similar community in Los Angeles? That was.
I believe so. I mean, I think still today there is a big Jewish population in Los Angeles. There's lots of shuls or synagogues. Some of them very, very Orthodox in the Los Angeles area. If you look at the Fairfax area, that's a very, very Orthodox area of Los Angeles. And so, yes, that might be one of the reasons why they settled in Los Angeles, even though New York has a huge Jewish, or had and still has a huge Jewish population. And maybe they had friends here, but that I can only speculate. If someone were to ask me, you know, who would you like to have dinner with, to have a conversation with, past or, you know, person passed away or living, I might say my great grandparents, so I can ask them questions. So I can know my family history and why they did certain things, and be able to pass that down to my son, who now, you know, has his own son at almost 5 months old. So to be able to pass down that history and knowledge, that would be amazing. So those would be really good questions to ask.
So through, as you mentioned before, Laura, through the researches that were done in the last couple of years, you learned that Susan, which I'd like to turn to now, is your cousin. Or yes. You're related.
I knew I had a cousin in Mexico City, because my grandmother Erica talked about her Aunt Lee, but I really think was more of a cousin Lee versus an aunt, but I say that's what she called her, Aunt Lee, who had a son Mario who lived in Mexico. So with all this, so I've known that for years. And so when Aaron got us all together and a Mario was in the mix and was in amongst the talks with us, I'm like, this must be the Mario that my grandmother used to talk about, her Aunt Lee or cousin Lee and son Mario. So this must be the same Mario. Come to find out, yes, it's the same Mario. But when Susan and I were talking, we were chatting via email chain and sharing pictures, we come to the realization that the two of us are also cousins through my great grandmother. So that's how it all relates. It would be nice to be able to see a family tree, to see how it all connects. between Susan, Mario, and myself. And I think Aaron has pieced together some of the information for us, but physically seeing a tree, that would be really, really special. I
can imagine. Yeah, Aaron, you mentioned, is also participating as in the audience today. He is, of course, very important for the family research around the. There he is, for the family research, and also Volker Scholz-Goldenberg also joining us today. Both, I think, very important for bringing together pieces of of history and bringing them also to the NS-Dokumentationszentrum.
He has given us so much information that we are so grateful and thankful to what he has done. And Aaron actually found me through Ancestry, through a cousin. He connected with a cousin and says, "Do you know a Laura?" And then she reached out to me and says, "This Aaron guy says he has information regarding your dad." I'm like, "What?" So I immediately, I'm like, okay, I'll take that line. I'll see what he has to say. And here we are. So thank you to Ancestry.com for connecting Aaron to me and to all of you.
Yes. So, Susan, I'd love to bring you into the discussion as well. As you are the granddaughter of one of the co-founders of the Kleiner Kölner Club, the Jewish Carnival Club, which was founded by Laura's grandfather Max. And Susan, you have some knowledge as well about your family's history and about your grandfather Siegfried called Fritz, and maybe you should give you can give us as well a short overview or a short introduction to your grandfather's life, and maybe also talk about how you learned about your family's history. And of course, I'm also happy to share my screen and show some of the pictures you sent me.
Well, thank you. Hello, everybody. And I would like to thank the Documentation Center and Aaron and Axel and Volker. Without them, I think a lot of this information or even photos that I had or items that I had no idea how they connected or what they meant. So this is what I think Aaron and the others started with. They found this photo of really well-dressed, handsome men apparently taking a hike in their suits and ties. And this was it turns out, thanks to the group, they started to identify the faces. So this was an outing, it turns out, of the Carnival Club. And on the right, circled in red, is my grandfather, Siegfried Sommer, or Fritz, or Fred, as he was called in America. And on the left is his brother, uncle, so he would be my mother's uncle, Joseph Sommer. So this Joseph Sommer is the father of Mario, who Laura was talking about earlier. So Mario is also my cousin. His mother, Lilo, and my mother, Helga, were cousins. I might have that, something like that. But so it was just remarkable to see this photo and realize, I think something important here is that this was a friend, these were also their friends. It was a social group. I believe they were all business people or somehow connected that way. And they happened to all be Jewish too. But as I've learned about this a little bit more, my sense was that it was first about love of Germany, love of Cologne, and friendship. And I think the Jewish part kind of was just there. It wasn't the first and most important part. So, and I can, so as far as my family, so Siegfried on the right and Joseph on the left had a clothing store in Cologne, which was called Gebrüder Sommer. And I think we have a photo. It was in various locations around the city, but we have a couple of photos of that. It was actually started by my great-grandfather, Emanuel Sommer, and he gave this clothing store to his two sons, Siegfried and Joseph. And you know, I think one of the things, because my grandfather was in business, I heard stories about how much his customers loved him, and my grandmother, Mariana, would work there sometimes to help him. And he was beloved. It was a lovely store, and I think his customers loved him. And I think, you know, one of the things that I hear in the stories that I've heard is that Siegfried and Joseph both served proudly in World War I for Germany. And I think because of that, they always felt that Germany would take care of them, that nothing would happen to them, because they were so proud of their German heritage, and particularly proud of being from Cologne. And I know, you know, my mother, who was born in Cologne, as was my aunt, you know, when I hear stories about Cologne, they talk about what a cosmopolitan city it was, what a wonderful city, what a beautiful Kölsch dialect, and how it would make them smile. It would make my mother smile to hear that Kölsch dialect. So a little bit about their background as they were as they grew up in Cologne. So my mother, Helga, and my aunt Hannelore went to a school nearby where they lived on Blumenthalstrasse. And, you know, they were happily going to school nearby. It was a school of Christians and Jews and everyone. And then as things started to get bad in Germany, they were no longer allowed to go to that school. And my mother was probably about 10 years old, my aunt about 7 years old. And my mother talked about how painful it was to not be able to see her friends. Soon they couldn't go to the school, but then soon enough, they couldn't even associate with them. Jews were not allowed to associate with them. So they went to a different school, and as things, you know, restrictions continued, you know, and did we find a photo of the store by chance?
Yes, I thought you could see it, but maybe I try again to share my screen, because we have the photo and we also have a very nice picture of Helga and Hannelore as school children. I'll try to share my screen again. Sorry.
I was going to say that group photo that we had of Susan, I actually have that. It's in the scrapbook of my family.
Yeah, because
my great grandfather is in that photo wearing the hat, the city.
Oh, and the one on the outing in the woods.
Yeah.
In
Yes.
their ties. Yes, I love that.
Max is in that.
Uh-huh.
Do you see the picture of the store now?
Yeah, so here's one of the Gebrüder Sommer stores. This one was, I believe, my great-grandfather Emanuel, because it says 1913. So this was the first store. And then he gave it to his children, Joseph and Siegfried. But I wanted to mention the store because I was talking a little bit about Helga and Hannelore growing up in Cologne, and how when things started getting bad for the Jews, there they are as children. I remember my mother talking about this photo. There's Hannelore on the left and Helga on the right. How important that first day of school was because they got those, what are they called? Tüten?
Schultüten, yeah.
Yes, filled with candy. So you can see A, how happy they are, and B, how cute their clothing is, because it turns out a grandfather on my grandmother's side had a Kinderkleider store as well. So they occasionally would sometimes model for the other grandfather. So clearly these were happy children in Cologne until things started to get bad. When my mother was age 14, she could no longer be allowed to attend school. She was forced to work in a hair salon. She worked, the hair salon was run by a man from the SS. And although she was not paid, my mother said the owner treated her really decently and told her to simply tell the customers that she was a niece from Hamburg. So she was working in that store in the mornings. My aunt was still able to go to school because she was much younger. And then everything changed on Kristallnacht on November 9th, 1938. Helga went to the store, to the hair salon as usual for her shift, and her boss said, look across the street. There was a butcher shop and the windows had been smashed. And he said, go and leave and go and find your parents. And so Helga walked 20 minutes to Gebrüder Sommer, the clothing store, which was then Weidmark, according to my mother. Mm-hmm. So maybe we can show that photo of one of the store, the big photos of the store again. Mm-hmm. And so when she got to the store, she saw all the windows broken, and she saw clothing suits and dresses and coats being thrown out the windows, and they were hanging on the telephone wires. So here she is, she's 14 years old. She runs around to the back as she normally would. And there was a SS station there, an officer station there. And he said, was willst du hier? And my mother says she told me she could still hear in her head that man's voice saying, was willst du hier? What do you want here? And she luckily was always grateful that she didn't say, my father, my parents, and she just left. And she didn't say who she was. So she ran home, and her mother was at home. They tensely waited for her sister to come home, her younger sister, who did come home. And as luck would have it, or as fate would have it, her father, Siegfried, was on a buying trip in Berlin. I'm sorry. He was on a buying trip in Berlin, and he knew he was going to be on this buying trip. So he worked out with his brother, Joseph. Joseph, could you watch Gebrüder Sommer on that day while I'm in Berlin? So sure enough, Joseph was in the store that day, and he was picked up and taken to Dachau. And luckily, he was able to escape Dachau. And then Joseph Sommer went to Belgium. And then by 1940, they were able to escape to the USA, Joseph Sommer and his family. For my grandfather and my mother's family, I think Kristallnacht was the wake-up call, because they had never thought that anything could happen to them because they had been so proud to be Germans. They had fought in the war. They were well known. They were well liked. So this is when the work started in earnest to try to get visas. They were on a very long waiting list to get to the USA. So this was now 1938 they started. They tried to get to Brazil. They had an uncle who paid for their visas or papers to get to Sao Paulo, and it turned out to be a swindle. So they lost all that money. So they tried to go to South Africa. They tried to go to Shanghai. Finally, after 4 years, their visas came through for America. And as my mother always said, that was probably the last boat out. It was 1941 that they got out and made it to New York.
Wait, they left from Belgium? Where they left from?
No. They were stuck in Cologne.
I see.
So they were in, and so when the war started, when the war broke out, they were all stuck in Cologne. So they started immediately after Kristallnacht to try to get out. But they were stuck.
I didn't know anybody had gotten out after 1940. I thought it was all.
Exactly. It was 1941. And Aaron probably can tell me exactly the date. It was on the Villa de Madrid boat, Spanish boat. They were on that boat for a month to make it to New York. But the date, I would have to look up exactly, but it was 1941. And so you can imagine that month between the beginning of Kristallnacht and 1941, when they finally left, the stories that I heard were about, they were the bombs that would go off, the fear, the police showing up at the door and taking their books, taking their radios, taking their possessions, and they had to share their apartment with 4 other families, and it sounded well. And then my grandmother would spend her time waiting in the ration lines. My mother was forced to work in a carton factory. Again, my aunt, I think she was able to because she was younger, to go to some kind of classes or something. And one story about, that my mother shared about my grandfather is that every once in a while, the police would come and tell Siegfried that he needed to show up at the police station. And my mother said, well, Siegfried would get to the police station, and because they were Sie sind alle Kölner, they were all Kölner, they were all Cologne, Kölner, he would somehow, they were decent, they had more heart, and he would come home. So this theme of Cologne and how much they loved Cologne and how close they felt to the Cologne people. Also, during those years as they waited to get out, my mother said that neighbors would come over at night, non-Jewish neighbors at their own risk, would come over in the middle of the night and bring them fresh fruit or bring them food, which was so hard to come by. So that feeling of friendship and community with Cologne, I think that was the essence of why my grandfather just never believed he would be forced to flee. So I think in general, as I said, they did start new lives. They came to New York at first. Eventually, they settled in Milwaukee. But I think that for Siegfried and Mariana and Helga and Hannelore, they all left their hearts in Cologne, and those hearts, were broken. But that it is where their hearts remain. So there they are, all are. That looks like Milwaukee. That's Hannelore, Mariana, my grandmother, Siegfried, my grandfather, and my mother, Helga, on the right.
Very nice photo.
And Susan, may I ask, as you laid out to us how the Siegfried and his whole family shared their love to Cologne, even in their new home in the US. But do you also remember like the impact of the carnival itself? Did that like impact on your mother or your aunt, so that it was still like vibrant or somehow there in the American exile, or wasn't that passed on, so to say, to the next generation, this love for carnival?
I would say it was conceptually, yes. I know that when they settled in Milwaukee, for example, they found other Germans from Cologne, and they would, be in, they would have parties together and such. But the stories that that I think Lisa or Vicki was telling about the Cologne festivities, it was not that distinct. It was more like, oh, Carnival was so much fun. I remember it. People were so happy. It was a little bit more general. So I think that for them, it was just part of something that they loved, but not. I can't say I don't have photos of any of them getting dressed up. We did kind of trace down, track. I have another cousin from my father's side who was also born in Cologne. His family ran the bakery in Cologne. And so to this day, he can sing some of the songs from Carnival. It's just something that is in his heart. And then so it's not specifically that, but I think, what struck me is that what I've learned about my grandfather is that he sincerely liked the community. And if he was in Cologne, it happened to be the Carnival parade. But if he was in Milwaukee, there would be parties in my grandmother's basement, and I'm sure there was music they played, from German music. But that's about, I don't have, we were looking frantically, is there a photo of him in costume or anything like that? And I couldn't find that.
And also, I'd love to ask you, as I maybe as Laura also was telling about how she learned, or even how she learned about her family's history, but in her case, maybe not that much as it all came down, or comes down to the scrapbook. You, Susan, you also shared some very crucial, very interesting documents with the NS-Doc, which is really helpful and interesting for us. And how did you learn as the granddaughter from as Siegfried's granddaughter from this time in Germany? Did you have the chance to talk to your mother about it, or how was it passed on, the knowledge about this time? Was it present in your family?
Yes and no. Both my parents, my father was in hiding in Holland, and my mother fled Cologne in 1941. So it wasn't talked about deeply until as I got older, I started to ask more questions. And so they answered all the questions. And my mother actually, she wrote, she did a testimony and talked about what she remembered. My Aunt Hannelore, who had lived in Mexico, she wrote about her experiences. So I think the older I got, the more I talked about it. But, one example is, I think they were so grateful to be alive, to be in America. And they were a generation that was so proud to be American and proud proud of the opportunities. And so what they did for my brother and myself, what my parents did is celebrate that. We didn't do a lot of the American things. I never went camping as a kid, or I never, I didn't baseball, I maybe went to, but they gave us other opportunities. They stressed education and they work hard. So I can't say that we talked about it a lot, but as I got older, I got more and more interested, and I was a journalist, so I started to interview my parents, and my grandmother was still alive. My grandfather I never met. My grandmother, Sommer, she died too early when I was pretty young, so I didn't get to interview her. But that's in general how I started to learn. But with being contacted by Aaron out of the blue and being asked about these connections, there were boxes from my aunt and from my mother of photos and scrapbooks that I had maybe once looked at. I once looked at one of the scrapbooks with my mother, but it was history. It was not, I couldn't quite connect with it. When Aaron, started to ask these questions, and then I started to look at them with a different eye, it just opened this incredible world. I think there might be a picture of the medal that was like a perfect example of something that I saw in my mother's drawer since I was little. It was a very heavy bronze medal, and I thought it was so strange. I don't know if you have that photo. I'm
sorry, I didn't.
Oh, you don't?
Have it in.
Maybe not.
I'm sorry.
That's okay. But it's a photo, and I always thought it was in my mother's dresser drawer. And as a kid, of course, you always look at the dresser, what's in there. And I thought it was such a strange medal. There was a Wappen, a shield, which I recognized as a Cologne shield because I had seen that before. But then there were these initials, KKK, and I was terrified that in English that would mean the Ku Klux Klan. I mean, a horrible, and I didn't understand it. So when Aaron and I were talking, and he said, "Do you have any photos?"
Aaron's got it there.
Oh, Aaron's got the shield or the medal. So he told me what this was. It was an honor that was given by the Kleine Kölner Club. That was the KKK, Kleine Kölner Club, to my grandfather as a special honor. And here it was in my mother's drawer all these years.
Yeah, thank you. Laura was nodding earlier. Can you relate to this, to what Susan said?
Most definitely. I didn't, my grandmother passed away, I think in 2002, my great grandmother in 1980. But because my grandmother never wanted to go to Germany, she didn't want to have anything to do with Germany. She didn't want to talk about Germany. So as I got older, I never asked her questions about her life, about Germany, about her family, anything. I had, many years I could have asked questions and I didn't because she didn't want to talk about it. So when Aaron reached out to me once again, I looked at the things that I had, and my dad passed away 8 years ago. So once Aaron reached out to me, I had no one to go back to and ask. Everyone had passed away. And I had my mother, but she only knew so very limited information. Because if they did talk about it, it was all in a different language, which German or Yiddish, that my mom didn't understand. So I relied on my mom for some things, but most of it I was like clueless on. But with Aaron's help, with giving us some documents and looking at the pictures in scrapbook that I have, I was able to piece together as much as I could. But definitely Aaron has given me, you know, from point A to point B to point C and connected the dots, which in my is been so helpful. And in one of the pictures in the scrapbook, there is a picture of a medal that I'm trying to find it. As I remember, I have copies of everything I sent you. Oh yes, there is a picture of a medal from it says 1964. So I don't know if that's when my grandfather went back, because that was before I was born, or when this medal was given out. So I don't know if it's similar to what Susan has. But yes, I can totally relate, because I didn't look at these prior to Aaron reaching out. And now I can't get enough information.
You know, I think there's another piece to this. One is the difficulty that I think all our families shared talking about this. I mean, I remember there was my father also, and my mother, who's also a refugee, didn't talk about it. And I remember approaching my father because he had a letter that my grandfather, Hans, had gotten from one of his brothers after the war, that basically Hans was one of 10, and the letter basically told him in many pages what had happened, who'd been killed in what camp, who'd been killed, you know, blown up on a boat in the sea, and what the status of everyone was. And I remember asking my father to translate it for me. And he started, and he didn't get one line out before he said, "I just can't." And I think that was very much just a part of all their lives in terms of what really they could relive. But I think the other part of this is, here, you know, these people were relatively young people. Even, you know, my grandparents at that time, certainly from where I stand now, these were relatively young people, and they had moved, in my case, to New York, and they had new lives to begin. They had their friend, they needed to regather with their friends, and their efforts were connecting in a way that moved them forward. And so I think there was the part in terms of the pain. I mean, I also have now gone to Cologne a few times over the years, and it's in those trips and through Aaron and Volker and Alan and Nina and all the people that I've met there, that I see, like, for the first time, what my father's experience could have been, and what my grandparents' experiences were. But there's also the part where there were new refugees, and like new refugees, they worked very hard to build a life and move their families forward. They had children. They had to put their effort into establishing themselves in this new country and making connections for themselves and for their families. And I think that's part of what happened with them as well.
They needed to move forward with their lives instead of backwards on a horrible thing that happened.
Right.
And with Aaron and Volker and the documentation center, connecting the dots and connecting all of us for this would not have happened without the Documentation Center, Volker and Aaron doing their hardest to find everyone and descendants of people from Cologne. It's amazing that we have this group. I remember going to Cologne with Vicki and Lisa and walking those streets and going into places, knowing that my grandparents were there, my great-grandparents were there. They walked these streets, and it meant so much to be there, to get those goosebumps, knowing that my family went to the shul, walked these streets. I can't thank them enough for giving all that to us.
Thank you so much for sharing, and I think it would be a good opportunity to open up to the questions that may come from the audience there. I think you learned some very moving facts, and and I'm really happy, and thank you for sharing it. I have a question here in the chat that was put in from Ellen a bit earlier. I think it was related to Laura's contribution, because the question here says, where in California were they? I think that she means the Salomon family, and she says maybe they came to California for the entertainment industry. Is this a possible hint, Laura, there?
Possible. I know my great-grandfather was very much a I want to say a showman. He liked to talk. He had the gift of gab. He liked to obviously entertain, because that's what he did in Cologne, in participating in Carnival, and then coming to California and participating in so many Carnival things here in Los Angeles. And it could be for the entertainment, but maybe in some of the documents I have, it says why they came here, but I really have no good answer to that. But they participated not only in Carnival stuff, but a whole bunch of like German parties and stuff here in California, in Los Angeles too. But a lot of it was Carnival based.
Okay.
I just wanted to say hi. I'm in Los Angeles too. I'm Hans's great granddaughter.
Hi.
Great. I'm glad that you are joining us too. I have Kurt Marx with a showing of hands. I'm not quite sure if there's a question, because you have this sign there saying that you wanted to ask a question, but I don't think, but yeah, I see Cornelia Marco having a question. Cornelia.
Yes, it's actually more of a statement. So I'm a docent at the Los Angeles Museum of the Holocaust, and just wanted to add that the Los Angeles area, specifically, Lisa, because you were asking about Los Angeles, is around the Fairfax area, is where many survivors had other relatives who had immigrated earlier from Germany, Cologne, and they settled there and were sponsored by family members, including my mother and father. And there's a museum right in Pan Pacific Park, right behind the Grove, where the survivors actually came with their families and met there all the time and learned English in the local high school, Fairfax High School. And so survivors in 1961 formed the first Holocaust museum in the United States, called now Holocaust Museum LA. And that's where the museum is housed right now. And we're right now going under a $40 million expansion. And it's going to be amazing, and it is amazing. So just wanted to share that, how significant and important the LA area was for refuge, for, you know, survivors.
Thank you for the remark, Cornelia. That's a really interesting info you shared. I am seeing no more hands right now. There's no question posted into the chat, but maybe you, one or the other.
This is Joe. Can I speak for a second?
Of course, Joe. Please.
I'm Laura's husband, and it's nice to see everyone. Some of you I've seen previously on some of the Zoom calls and stuff with Aaron and Volker and everyone. I did want to say we did find something the other day that Laura may have mentioned or not, where it looked like her great-grandfather might have been on a TV show a couple times. Oh. We found a document in some of the stuff we were going through. So someone asking about the entertainment industry, it may have been a little bit on the side, but I'm not sure. And just speaking from someone on the outside looking in, I do want to say that this has truly changed Laura's life and mine. And, you know, learning what they learned, going to Cologne, meeting the people there, it completely changed how they felt about Germany and Cologne and the connection there and stuff. And it's a very positive thing.
Thank you, Joe. Yes, maybe that leads to a question that I myself would like to ask again, our four panelists, even though you already touched it in your contributions, but you all mentioned how the researches that Aaron and Volker and Axel and we at the NS-Doc in general did, how it sparked your dealing and your vision of your side of your family's history. Do you still now go on or try to go on with deep diving into documents? Are you trying to, as Joe just said, you found something, so you're still on researching? How do you now try to go on or move on with this research? Do you have time, or do you have?
I look through the scans of the scrapbook, so I can send you some to show, and I'm reading more of the fine detail, the little handwritten notes in the scrapbook. And there was one of my grandmother standing in front of her mother's store, but I never paid attention to that little jotted down note. I didn't even know that my great grandmother had a store. And I do read that we saw that Max was part of a TV show. I hadn't read that before until we were looking at the scans closely and enlarging them and being able to read some of the little notes that were handwritten on there. So yes, we are still digging. We are still looking for documents. We are still trying to read and find out more information. So it has only sparked our interest to find out more, because the history has to move on. We need to tell the story, because if we don't tell the story, it'll stop. And the next generation and then one after that will never know. So we have to keep telling the story. To do that, we have to learn
Yeah.
as much as we can.
Yeah. I have a very similar experience. I mean, in terms of looking, I continue to look, but I also on a personal note, I had this discussion with Aaron recently. Before, my father's family, my grandfather's family in Cologne was my father's family. And what has happened during my visits to Cologne and learning more and seeing more is that I own these people now. These are my family. And that could only have occurred having gone through all this familiarity or learning from the history. I mean, to the extent that I will be at the Documentation Center at the end of next month, because there is an exhibit that includes my grandfather, and I can stand there and I will stand there, you know. So it has been it's been very significant and very profound, and it continues. It continues.
And because of this research, I have learned of new family members that I didn't know I had. I didn't know I had a great aunt in Cologne, which I was able to meet when I was there a couple of years ago. I didn't, there's so much information to learn, to still learn, that it just needs to happen. And I'm so grateful to learn that I have a great aunt. I'm happy she has learned her history because of it. She's learned more information about her life and her family, that it's amazing.
I would agree. I think it's quite remarkable. And I think, you know, the Cologne government itself, they're doing an outstanding job, you know, to think that how much effort, and the documentation center and the mayor's office and all the volunteers like Aaron and Volker and Axel, how much they're doing for this to help. I think it is, to answer your question, Anamone, to, you know, yes, I want to continue. One example is my cousin Mario. I lived in Mexico briefly, and I met him, but and I met his mother Lilo, who was a cousin to my mother. But it was, you know, it was just, it didn't sink in. And now we learn, oh my goodness, our grandfathers were in business together. Why were they here? How did this work? How did, you know, when my parents immigrated to, when the Summer family immigrated first to New York, they stayed with his brother, Joseph Summer, briefly in their, you know, they didn't stay long because it was small, I'm sure, but the four, Hannelore, Helga, Siegfried, and Mariana, all stayed with their brother. So to kind of unpack, and then what happened, you know, and as I think back, this kind of relates to an earlier question you had, like how much did we hear about or talk about? At least for my, from my mother and my aunt, they were, when they had to flee, when they were on the boat to America, my mother was either 14 or 15, and my aunt was either 12 or 13. You know, and I think about myself as a woman, as a kid, as an adolescent at 13, 14, and how dramatic life was just to be a young person and then to be going through this. I can imagine that it's that the minute they landed in a safer place, that why discuss it? And also for my mother, throughout her whole life until she died, she learned to be secret. And I have learned to be secret as well. In fact, I was, as Aaron knows, I was very hesitant to be on a Zoom, this Zoom, because that secrecy was what kept them alive in many ways. And it's a danger to be open. But yet, as as Lisa or Laura was saying, we have to tell these stories, and these stories are important. So you have to be brave and share them.
I will say that my mother was probably the exception to all of the things that you're recounting. I know that her brother, Vicki's father, did not like talking about the war years or what happened in Germany beforehand, and got very emotional if he was asked to speak about it. My mother, maybe because of the age she was when she came here, she was 13, or maybe because of her personality, which was, I think, very much like her father's. She was extremely gregarious and outspoken, and she loved to talk, and she loved people to listen to her.
Yeah.
She talked about Cologne all the time. She talked about her childhood all the time, to the point that as a teenager, I would roll my eyes because I didn't want to hear about it anymore, so all of you, I'm kind of jealous because you all, have this interest, and I feel terribly guilty that as a young person, I didn't want to hear about it anymore because, all we ever talked about was, her family and her experiences and the boys that she had crushes on and what happened to the girlfriends that she knew and, all these things. And, and she actually, I think, if I'm not mistaken, Aaron, I don't know if Aaron met any of the other actual refugees in person, but he did know my mother before she died. She died in 2017. And, and I sort of just took up the mantle for my mother, who was very involved with him, with all this stuff. And I can remember going to Cologne when I was 10 years old. My grandfather had a surviving brother who, Vicki, correct me, was he in Auschwitz, Arno? Do you remember?
I don't remember which, maybe Aaron knows, I don't remember which camp.
Well, anyway, he was a camp survivor, and when I was 10 years old, we went to Cologne to meet him, and I have pictures of myself and my family when we went, and and at my mother as an adult, I'm sure she had hard feelings. I'm sure she did, but that's not what I heard about. I only heard about how wonderful everything was. So.
Can confirm. I heard it all too.
Yeah, all right. So.
Fascinating how the perspectives can be different. Now Aaron is in the picture, and I'm sure he has to share and contribute as well.
I first thanks to you all that you're here for us tonight, and that you're sharing your stories again. And I know it's not always easy to talk about it. I know that from the private talks with you, and I don't want to talk too much. I just want to say I had the honor to get to know Lilo. I always said to her when I sat in her kitchen, for hours talking, and I said, I found you in Queens. And she said, yes, you found me. And when we brought her back to Cologne in 2014, we walked through the city. And in the end of the tour, she said to me this very important sentence that we gave her back a little bit of her Heimat, of her home. And I think maybe that is a little bit what's it about, because in all of you, there is a little bit of Cologne still. I can see that and I can feel that, and when I'm with you. And so that's what Lilo said. We walked for a long time, and she said also, she told us also the horrible stories about Kristallnacht and yeah, that she lost her home, that she lost her Heimat, and that we were able to give it a little bit back. And that's, yeah, that's all I can say, and that's the most important part of it. So thank you for being here.
Yeah.
Yeah. Before I warmly thank you as well, I'll have a short I will scroll through you all so I don't miss any questions there might be. But right now I don't see any more.
Can you hear me?
Yes, please.
You can hear me. Well, I'm probably the only one here who's actually born in Cologne. Quite a few years ago. Yes, you can hear me, can you?
Yes, we can.
Yes. Well, I see that a couple of my cousin is there, and my good friend Larissa is there. So it's been quite interesting to hear people, second, third generation. Yes, I went to school in Cologne. I went to the Lutzerstraße school, and later on to the Javne. And I came here to England with the Kindertransport. So it's 85, 90 years ago. So it's quite some time. Yes, I remember a carnival. I've still got a photograph where I'm dressed up as a cowboy or something like that. So when I was about 12 years old. So it has certain memories. I've visited Cologne, of course, once or twice. And actually, I lived not all that far from Larissa. It's quite amazing that we actually lived around the corner where she lives today. So I had a large family. My uncle was a dentist. My other uncle was a butcher, Max Marx, Marcel Stein. I don't know whether you wouldn't remember it, but that was the case. So our family in general was living in Cologne or in the Rhineland. So I've got a family tree that's 500 years old. So it's quite a, yes, it's quite a long time. And I had an uncle, I think he was very much involved with Carnival. Max Salomon and his brother, they were very much involved before 1933, of course. So it's interesting to see how people have discovered their own background again. Unfortunately, my family, my parents lived in Cologne until 1942, when they were deported to Malé Trostenetz, if anybody's ever heard of it. And yes, that's sort of my history.
Thank you very much, Kurt Marx.
Vielleicht kann ich nur ganz kurz sagen,
Yes.
dass die Familie von Kurt Marx, dass sie, sorry, sorry, I have to speak in English. I just wanted to say that the family of Kurt Marx is related to Willi Salomon, to
Willi Salomon, yes,
Marx's
sure.
brother.
That's his brother.
So Laura
Yes.
and Kurt, you're related too. Just to let you know.
Yes.
Wonderful.
Willi Salomon's wife was my father's sister.
See, this is why I love this, because now I have met a new family member. This is wonderful.
It definitely is. So let's see. There's something going on in the chat, but I think this is also this is a nice side effect. Some networking, but I'm networking through this meeting. I don't see any more questions or remarks right now, and I think we really had a very interesting evening. Speaking from Cologne, for you, for the panelists, it's more of a daytime experience, of course. Yes, I think I would really love to thank our 4 panelists, and I really extend my thank you to Susan, to Laura, to Lisa, and to Vicki for sharing your grandfather's and great-grandfather's story, but also your own story and your own relation and deep relation with this heritage, with this very, very interesting and very rich stories. And for me, it was really interesting how different and similar at the same time your perspectives and your own relations and the relations can be and are. So that was really enriching, really interesting. And I'd like to thank you all for participating in our family talks. And of course, I'd love to thank you all for attending, for joining us in this event. And Birte, as she's still with us. She is the technical support today, but she's like the mastermind of this series as well, of the family talks. And our series will continue. Will continue in May or June, I think. But it can say a little bit more about it.
Yeah, can I just say that we will have the next issue of the series on June the 3rd in commemoration of the Kindertransports, which were organized by the grammar school's headmaster in Cologne. And we will have Kurt on the panel. So if you're interested to hear more of his story, I'm really curious, and I'm really happy to have him on the next panel, commemorating the courageous commitment of the school's headmaster. And he will give us more insights into his experience on the Kindertransports and his life story. So if you're interested, yeah, well, I'd be really glad to see you all again there.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for having us and letting us share our stories.
Yeah,
So,
thank you again to the
stories
Documentation
carried on.
Center.
Yes. Special thank you to Anna-Mone and Birte. I mean, that it's because of you that we're all here talking. Thank you so much for organizing this and all your help with the photos and everything else.
And the technical support to get logged on.
And the Google support, the IT support. Yes, we need.
It all worked out. And of course, Vicki, we are really excited to see you in Cologne soon. That will be really nice. And yeah, to all of you, all the best to Wisconsin, to California, to New York, and yeah, see you soon.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Lovely to see you again.
Thank you.
See you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.